So are punters people too? That is the question. Okay, of course they're people, but are they important players on the football field as well? Or are they positions that, okay, maybe matter a little bit, but not something you should be spending a ton of resources into? I want to kind of look at the data and figure out, can we figure out exactly how much punters matter? Again, I know Pat McAfee will be saying, yes, paid him $20 million a year, but I don't know if that's actually true. So let's get into the data and figure this stuff out. So here's the way I decided to figure out how important punters are. First, I want to just take the difference between the best punter in the league of the past 5 years and the worst punter in the league in the past 5 years. And about on average, the best punter in the league would have an average punt of 50 yards down the field, whereas the worst punter in the league would have a punt of, on average, of about 42 yards down the field. So about an 8-yard difference. Over here, if we want to do net yards, so this is including returns, it's still 8 yards down the field. It's not quite as far, but it's still going to be an 8-yard difference, 44 net yards to 36 net yards. This is also meaning that, I should mention, while the punter is going to be the one who gets all the credit here, it is not just the punter who has an impact on these plays. You have gunners who definitely matter on this type of thing, and even just the guys blocking up front matter a lot on this type of thing, plus plenty of other little details that bigger experts on this subject will know more than I will. But again, this is not an exact science necessarily, but it'll give us a pretty good indication of how important a punter is, and it seems like about 8 yards per punt. So here's where we're going next. Punts are on the decline. That's the top line here, because they are. Punts are on the decline. People aren't punting as much, as teams are realizing that it's not a smart strategy to willingly give the other team the ball unless you have to. And that's, I think, a good idea. You should only punt, out of necessity. Punts, by definition, are something that you do when things go wrong. Plus, offense is just getting better and better. So as offense gets better, punting is going to go down. That makes sense. But still, last year, the average team punted 3.7 times a game, meaning the average team punts 62.9 times a season, meaning that the best punter adds 503 yards above a replacement a season. Now, right off the bat, you think, wow, 500 yards, that's actually a decent amount. Like, that feels like a good chunk of yards, If a wide receiver has 500 yards, you think of them as like a solid contributor. Like a decent receiving tight end will get maybe 400 yards a season. But obviously, it's not quite the same thing, because when you're getting those yards as a receiver, you're also helping your team get more first downs. Whereas these yards are always going to just be the difference between 1st and 10 and 1st and 10 in a different area of the field, making them not quite as important. But still, field position does matter. So now we figured out the total yards that a punter seemingly adds throughout the course of the season, but what does this tell us? And I couldn't really think of an exact perfect way to figure out how we can, perfectly measure, turn these yards into points, which can then turn it into kind of a WAR system, which can then allow us to know how much we should pay them, right? What do we do from here? Here's what I decided to do, because again, it's just so weird. You have this yardage total, you have these punts, but how do you know exactly what the differential is for this? Well, here's what I do have. There, some data I don't have, some data I do have. I have the data of how many points you get unexpected when you start a drive inside your own 10, and how many points on average you get when you start a drive from the 11 to the 20. So in the first 10-yard chunk of the field and the second 10-yard chunk of the field. What I decided to do, maybe this is unfair, but it'll give us a rough idea, I think, is I simply just said, okay, well, let's just say if you have 500 yards added for punts, well, what is the average point expectancy of pushing someone from the 11 to 20 range back to the 1 to 9 range? Just what's the average expectancy you add there? The average point expectancy you get there would be 0.08 points. That's the difference in starting a drive from inside your own 10 to the 11 to 20. Meaning that if the best punter in the league compared to the worst punter in the league can accumulate the value of essentially doing that 50 times a season to your opposing team, that means you're giving your own team about 4 points, which doesn't sound like a ton. It's not a ton, but there's not zero value in this either. Again, I think it's fair to quibble with, okay, is that actually the best way to figure out how impactful a punter is. I just can't figure out a better way. So that's what we're going to go with. I guess I could watch every single punt from last year and just chart what the difference was, and then go that way. But even that, I think you can come up with some issues there. So I think this is a fine rough estimate of 4 points added for a punter, which if you use a 40-point is a win scale, that's still a tenth of a win that a punter adds. That's not nothing. According to my model I use, a WAR of 0.10 WAR is worth roughly 2.5 million. So a punter that's a really good punter should be getting more than league average. They should be getting around 2.5 million. So this is to say that you should spend some resources in it. It's not as simple as just sign anybody off the street and go because it doesn't matter. No, it does matter a little. So therefore, these are some of the underrated punters in football. Jack Fox, I mean, what a contract this guy is on at 0.9 million, second best punter in football in terms of average depth of punt last year. So hey, he's helping his team out a lot. Andy Lee helping his team out. Blake Gillikin, I believe is how you pronounce that. He's helping his team out. Jake Bailey, of course, the Patriots. I mean, Jake Bailey's literally the least paid punter in football, and he's still, he's on a minimum contract, still being a top 10 punter. Of course, the Patriots figure this stuff out. And Thomas Morstead, who, the Saints got rid of, hey, he's still been a top 10 punter at 1.3 million. That seems to be a value contract there. And also, I should have cleared up just exactly what you're looking at. You might be confused. Sorry about that. I'll explain it now. Just what you see is it's the guys on the left. You probably figured it out, but second means for Jack Fox, he was the second best punter in terms of average depth of punt, and then number over is going to be how much millions of dollars they're making. So 0.9 million. Meanwhile, over here, so Michael Dixon, these are the overrated or overpaid punters, not necessarily overrated, but overpaid punters. Michael Dixon of the Seattle Seahawks is the 10th, was the 10th best punter in the league last year, but he's getting paid 3.7 million. So even if you want to say that he was the best punter in the league last year, that's still higher than I would say that you should pay the best punter in football. Although there is a model where some people view it actually as that. I've seen some models go as high as to say that for 1/10 of a win, that'd be worth up to 5 million, which means that if you are the best punter in the league, maybe you could argue that you should get 5 million. That's something you could argue. Although keep in mind, that would be operating under the assumption that, the best punter in the league is the only reason that you're gaining those 8 yards extra per punt, which of course is not true. But regardless, Tress Way, also someone who, these next kind of 4 guys all are in that. It depends on how much you think you should pay per win by somebody, because again, some people just have different opinions on that based on how much you think you should pay quarterbacks and things like that. And then finally at the bottom, again, kind of a couple of weird ones, like Bradley Pinion for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who I'm assuming is going to be off the roster soon since he was the, because he should be, right? He was the last placed punter in terms of average depth of punt, and yet is getting paid 2.8 million, which is over how much I think you should pay the best punter in football. So maybe not the best contract there. Also, Sanchez not really living up to his paycheck, and same thing with Cameron Johnson's been solid, but again, not living up to the paycheck according to me. But if you are someone who believes that you should pay more for a win, he actually could be a fine contract. I think the other X factor here, of course, is that you can get good punters without having to pay decent money for them. It does seem like, getting an undrafted free agent punter, those guys still tend to be pretty decent. So, probably just do that, because they're probably going to be, if you're a team that can evaluate this stuff well, which basically every team can, you can get a decent punter that you don't have to spend any resources for, and are still going to be in the middle of the league. So you're still getting maybe 0.5 WAR there, and I don't think that other 0.5 WAR is worth the few millions that you could spend on a more important position, or even like a depth piece somewhere else. That's kind of the way I view it, my personal team building philosophy. But there's no denying that you can get a high quality punter on a good contract in free agency if you are smart about it. So that's kind of why I think it's interesting. So yeah, I guess to end the question that I started, do punters matter? Yes, they do. Do they matter a lot? Not really. They're not, quite frankly, I think it's fine to, once the punt happens, leave a little early to go to the bathroom. I think that's something that I'm not going to hold against you because, again, the reality is it's just not a massive deal. That's at least what the data says. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And, of course, as always, thanks for watching.